I don't normally do podcasts or interviews. I usually find it hard to sit still long enough, let alone to ask an interesting question. But today's different because this just feels like a conversation between two friends. My guest is Tom Bills. Tom is not only an incredibly skilled and respected guitar maker, he's also a generous teacher and the founder of the Luthier's Edge, which is a platform that has become a real home for people learning and exploring this craft, as well as we'll go on to discuss, becoming a place for community. I first came across Tom during my second apprenticeship. I watched a Q&A live stream and I just remember thinking, wow, this bloke is exactly the kind of craftsperson that I want to be when I grow up. And I think it's becoming rather a common thing for new luthiers to look up to Tom as an unofficial mentor through the Luthier's Edge. And he's just a pivotal figure in modern guitar making, both as a teacher and just in his own right as a maker. So it's more of a personal win to sit here now as Tom's colleague and his friend. Tom's been incredibly kind to me, not only as a giver of knowledge, but also recently with his encouragement and his support. And I'm interviewing him to hopefully share that with you. His spirit is so infectious, and I hope that I can communicate his openness and also his personality with the questions that I ask him, and just to show the time that he gives so freely to others in this craft, as well as to people outside of it. This chat does get emotional at times, and there are times that we touch upon difficult and sensitive, let's just say, subject matter, so consider this as a gentle content warning. But most of all, I hope you enjoy our conversation. I know you'll find it as inspiring as I did. Tom, you'll be pleased to know that I've already introduced you and your many talents and achievements to the watchers, so you don't have to sit through a list of your own credentials, so we can just get stuck in. How are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for putting this together.
So I guess I just wanted to acknowledge, just to start with, why we're here. So just to summarize, I had a client near you in St. Louis, in Missouri, I want to say.
Missouri.
And we just ended up having a chat, you and I, and it was just one of the most inspiring chats I'd had in a long time. And it reminded me that this community of Luthiery can be a really fantastic, supportive place. And the Luthier's Edge is really a way that you've brought that to life and to make it a more welcoming place. And it's a real asset to the industry. And we will touch upon that more later, but to start with, for me, I hate the question, how did you become a guitar maker? Because my own answer is pretty boring. But I'm under the impression that yours is a little bit more interesting. So maybe we could just start with that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's see. I guess the starting, we'll pick up kind of when I was in, maybe I'll go back even a little bit further because it might, depending on where the conversation goes, it may kind of circle back around. But I started college with a double major in oil painting and guitar, jazz guitar, and had a really bad experience with a professor who, he basically got up on the first day of music theory and said, you guys have all had this in high school, so we're just going to skip everything and you guys just don't even worry about it for the next 2 semesters. And so basically didn't teach anything, and then proceeded to sort of like shame me publicly in front of the class because I didn't have any of that kind of stuff before. And so it was this really like traumatic sort of like experience that I had there with music, and so much so that I kind of gave up on that dream of guitar. Before that, I was in the jazz band in high school, and there's a whole story behind all that too. But and then fast forward about 5 majors later, I kept switching every so often, searching, and I came home one Christmas break. I have 2 sisters and a brother, and my family, my dad and them, they were gone somewhere. It was just me and my mom, and we were sitting there talking. I think this was 1994, and she said, "Well, why don't we go to see a movie or something?" And I was like, "Okay, let's just go up there." This was kind of, this is old days where you just kind of went to the movies to see what was playing or something. And so we went up, and the show that was about to show was one called Mr. Holland's Opus. And I hadn't really heard much about it, but we went and saw it. And something just like amazing happened when I watched that, because he, and I mean, it's a little bit of a sad story, but it had this, whatever this meaning just jumped out at me, and it just reminded me of how powerful music could be, but not just for the sake of the music, but how it impacted people's lives. And so that I just knew right away when I walked out of that theater that I had to like forget all the other stuff and keep going in that direction and pursuing music. Now, I had no idea about guitar making at that point. So within a week, I left my fraternity, left my girlfriend, I didn't even go back to the college I was going to get all my stuff. And I went and I auditioned for a local university here called Webster University. It has a pretty good music program. And so I went and auditioned for that. And within another week, I was already enrolled, totally going for it with guitar. So, but with kind of a new, deeper purpose kind of behind it all. And so maybe a year into that or something, I was studying jazz guitar. So my new focus was a double major of audio technology, which is like recording studio stuff, and jazz guitar. So I needed a jazz guitar really bad. And when I started, I think I only had a Strat or something, and I was feeling pretty, I was like the odd guy out, because everybody else, I don't know how they all did it, but one guy had a D'Acquisto archtop, and these guys had these amazing guitars, and I show up with my Strat, and I was feeling pretty less than because of that. And so I started having this idea, well, maybe I could build myself a guitar and save some money, and maybe that'd be a way for me to do it, because I had grown up, and you're laughing because you know that you're not going to save money by building a guitar. Yeah, but it was enough for me to sell myself on the idea. And, I grew up, my dad was a carpenter. Both of my grandfathers were cabinet makers and carpenters and stuff like this. And so it was just like, I just felt like it was something I could do. I grew up working for my dad a lot, doing construction and cabinetry and finished carpentry and stuff. And, so at the time, I started to embrace this idea. I was working at a local guitar shop in the evenings, teaching guitar lessons to make money. And I went and talked to the guitar tech, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about making an archtop. What do you think I could do this? Like, what's actually involved? Because I really had no idea then. And he said, to my shock and disappointment, he said, don't even waste your time. It's way too hard. You're never going to be able to do it. Just save some money up. I know. He's like, just save your money and just buy one and you'll be fine. Just don't waste your time building one. You're not going to be able to do it. And I kind of believed him for a while. And so like another, I don't know, at least a semester or something went by. I think I started playing a acoustic steel string, because I did have one of those in my classes, but it still just didn't work, I'm trying to be a serious jazz musician and I just don't even have a jazz guitar. And so anyway, this one day, it was like a fall day, and there's a place in St. Louis called The Loop, and it's kind of like this older part of town, and there's some really cool shops, and it's just, oh, you went there?
Yeah, that's where I went the night I delivered my guitar. Near you, I went to Blueberry Hill, and I got a fat burger with, I seem to recall, a ginormous onion ring on it, which is weird for a Brit. But yeah.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And so this one day, I just had this feeling like, I think I need to go down there and just walk around and see what happens.
So a little walkabout?
Yes. I'm big on that to this day. And that's what I love to bring into the way I make guitars too, is like to be open to that kind of wonder and trying to like sense those small little leadings, I think that's really important. And so I'm walking down the sidewalk and I see up ahead this little music shop. And back then, I mean, I don't know if it still is, but back then it was illegal to get those jazz fake books because they had like uncopyrighted music in them. And so we were instructed by our teachers that you had to bring $20 and like, I forget, there was like a whole thing you had to do. It felt like you were buying drugs or something. And you had to go in there and you had to tell the guy something and give him the $20. And then, and when he would, slip you the fake book and you had to, anyway. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that little place. And just the thought occurred to me, I wonder if they have any books on guitar making. And so I walk in there and I ask him, do you guys have any books on guitar making or anything like that? And he goes, well, no, we don't have anything, but you should talk to my guitar tech guy, and because he's made some guitars before. He's made a couple guitars. And so he's like, I'll go get them. Hold on a second. So he goes and gets them. And this guy walks out. His name is Mike King. and super nice, super talented guy, and super generous guy. And he tells me about a book called How to Make an Archtop Guitar. I think that's the title, right? By Bob Benedetto. And he's like, yeah, there's this book by Bob Benedetto. You need to go get it, and you'll find everything you need in there about how to make an archtop. And so I think maybe we exchanged numbers or something. I can't remember exactly. Well, I went straight from there to a bookstore, and I got that book. They had the book. I sat down, and I read the entire thing from cover to cover before I even paid for it. And it was like, I knew my life was changed. It was just like a powerful moment. And so I got the book, and of course, then I got back and started trying to figure out how I was going to build it. And from that point on, it was just like all green lights. Like, I'm going to do this. There's nothing going to stop me. It doesn't matter who said it was hard or anything else. The problem was I still didn't have some of the tools and things like that. And so I got some things I borrowed from my dad and other stuff like that. And I ended up making a deal with Mike, the guy from that little shop, and he was kind enough for $20 a week, like a guitar lesson. He would let me go to his shop for about an hour and use, like, I did like cut the fret slots, all the things that needed like specific Luthier tools, because I had a lot of the bigger woodworking things, the basic general woodworking things. And and so that's how I was able to make my first guitar. And that's kind of where the story all began. Hopefully this isn't getting too long. Just stop me if I'm rambling too far.
Oh yeah, not at all. No, I will.
So I started showing up now. By this point, I was nearing maybe the last year of school, and I was studying with some of the top players in St. Louis. And St. Louis at that time, and I don't know if it's still like this anymore, because I've kind of moved away from the city. Now I'm further out, so I don't go back in there as much. But there was just a really great jazz scene. Like, we used to go stay up all night at the clubs, like there was little jazz clubs, kind of open mic kind of situation where you could just jam. And there were some great players. And I was taking lessons from some of those guys. I would show up with this guitar that I made. Of course, I brought it to class with me every day because, it's a jazz performance sort of degree. And so you're on the spot every day. And so I had the guitar with me all the time. And some of my teachers started saying, hey, that guitar is actually pretty good. And I was like, really? I mean, I had no basis. I didn't own a jazz guitar. I never had anything to compare it to even. And so some of them started hinting about, hey, maybe you could build me one. And it never really clicked in my mind that could be a job or a profession or anything like that. And then, let's see. So then those thoughts were kind of swirling around. There was one other pivotal moment where a really great guitar maker who was one of the professors there who taught the really hard classes, Jazz Theory 1, 2, 3, and 4, named Steve Schenkel, who taught me an amazing lesson in Jazz Theory 3, I think, where I missed passing that class. I'm embarrassed to say, kind of, but I'm glad it happened now in retrospect. It was all he would play the chord and you'd have to hear it and then write it out, so it'd be like with a 13, flat 9, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that was my weak point at one point. It kind of is now because I'm really out of practice now. But anyway, and so I didn't pass. I had to get like a C, or I don't remember what it was. But and I went to his office and I was like, man, I missed it by like 2 points. Is there any way, you know how hard I work? Is there any way I can get there? And he said, sorry, I don't give out grades. I just add up numbers. And I was so embarrassed because a lot of my classmates moved on, and then I repeated that class. But through the process of that, I learned a valuable lesson from him that a teenage kind of punk like me needed. And then that I couldn't get away with something like that and weasel my way out of it. And I also was forced to do really good. I ended up getting an A in that class and then moving on. And it was a great lesson. But anyway, towards the end of college there, Steve and I were walking. I got to know him after 5 semesters, and anyway, we were walking out of class one day and we were just talking about something, and I had my guitar and stuff. And he said, hey, have you ever thought about pursuing a career in actually, because I think we were talking about, he's saying that he liked my guitar and stuff. And he played for the St. Louis Symphony, and he was an excellent player, amazing. Like, the way he could hear music was incredible. But anyway, he said, have you ever thought about being a guitar maker, like professionally, basically? And I played with that thought before, but something different happened. Like when he said that, it just like something clicked a little bit, and I didn't quite understand what it was, but I just remember that moment vividly, like some kind of spark went off or something settled deeper inside of me about that idea. Then, okay, so the plan is this going, just stop me if it goes too long because I feel like I'm just rambling.
This is all great. I'm forgetting that we're in an interview
Okay.
even. It's interesting.
Okay, great. All right, so here's where the story kind of takes an interesting turn. So I graduate, and my plan at the time was I was planning the next semester to go back and try to work on my master's. At the time, I was still kind of inspired from Mr. Holland's opus, and what he did in the movie was he was a teacher. And so I kind of felt like that was a direction I wanted to go because I still had that little seed of like the purpose of the music is the way that it can impact and inspire, and like help people. And so about a week, let's say, so I graduated, and about a week after that, my dad was going to help me build a deck on my house because I had just bought my first house a little before that. And and ironically, all the time that I had been working for him, because I think my last year of school, I had no classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I worked for him doing high-end kitchen cabinet installs, like to make extra money. Of course, on top of my guitar lessons, I was doing in the evenings, and anyway. But I was so careful all those years. Like I was like, I've got to make sure nothing ever happens to my hands because I need my fingers to do this, and the construction work a lot of times was kind of dangerous, and I always was, all the other people in my family that were carpenters and everything, they just have those big bear paw hands, and their bodies are just a big carpenter guy. They're made for that, and I was the skinny kid with the little delicate hands and everything.
Yeah, jazz fingers.
Yeah, jazz fingers. And anyway, so I had a fear about that, which is probably not good, I guess, in retrospect. So anyway, my dad comes over and we were laughing because there was an old show called Tool Time, I think, and had like Tim the Tool Man Taylor, and he always had like the biggest, most powerful tool and everything, and it like 10 times more powerful than you need. And so we were going to drill these holes in the foundation to start building this deck, and he pulls out this big hammer drill for like drilling in concrete, and it's like this, I don't even remember how many horsepower it was, but it was made for like gigantic road work or something, and we were laughing about it. And for whatever reason, I put the drill up to the foundation and without grabbing the other side. And I think he even warned me. He said, a lot of guys break their arm on these if you don't do it right, so you got to be careful. And so I put it up to the foundation, and when I hit the trigger, the bit just caught. Like we were like talking, like I wasn't really thinking. And the bit caught, the thing spun, and when it did, these two fingers right here just pulled out to the side like that, like straight out the side. And these bones were all just like poking up in here. And
yeah, no, I can imagine. A big boy drill.
Yeah.
Big boy drill. Okay, so you're out there with your bones sticking out.
Yeah, and I go into like shock. I push him back. I push things back. I'm like, oh, look, everything's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And he's like, no, it's not fine. We need to go. We need to go to the. I couldn't accept that's what happened. It was like I was totally in shock. And so anyway, we go and unfortunately it was these certain type of spiral break, so it was kind of like shattered, and they said you couldn't reset it. Like it would never be the same. And they said, if you operate, then even if you operate and you were to get some of the position back and some of the movement of those fingers back, then the scar tissue is going to bind up all that stuff and you're going to have all kinds of other problems. And so I kind of accepted, I didn't know what else to do. So they put this like big, crazy, painful like clamp on there to try to hold it, but they said I wouldn't be able to make a fist and my knuckles were going to be like in the wrong position forever. And so I kind of I didn't know what to do. I just kind of like accepted what they told me. So then oddly, like a week later, my dad had been scheduled to have this back surgery because this was another thing in my family is everybody was construction guys. So they all messed up their backs and, all this stuff from a lifetime of hard labor. And so he was going to have this kind of serious back surgery done. And so I was sitting in the waiting room. They were doing the surgery on him. And I had this big clamp on my hand, and this nurse came out to give us an update on how he was doing. And she said, he's doing fine, and this is going on. And she kind of told us what was going on. It was all good news. And then she starts to walk away, and then she kind of turns around and looks back. She's like, "What happened to your hand?" And so I told her the story, like not the whole story that I just told you, but the super abbreviated version of crushed dreams and all that kind of stuff. She's like, "Well," I just kind of like out of the kindness of her heart, she's like, "Well, I assist some other surgeons and stuff, and I help a guy who's a hand surgeon, and maybe he's impossible to get into." And, she's told all this stuff. She said, "But I'll talk to him because I think I have a surgery." I forget what she said, like in the next day or two with him. She said, "I will talk to him." And I gave her my number, and she's like, "And I will get back to you if I can find a way to get him to look at your hand." And so she did, and he ended up actually operating. And
no way.
He basically just said, "We're going to get it like so that at least it looks normal, but you're not going to be able to use it probably because of the scar tissue and because of the way all the stuff." So they put in 2 metal plates and, well, no, it's 1 metal plate and like 4 screws or something, I think, is in there. And so, so all that happened. And then I was living alone at the time, and my mom says, It's funny when I tell this story, I think about how she was always like in these critical moments. It's interesting. She said, "Why don't you come stay with us while you're getting better?" Because I had no idea what was going to happen with my hand was going to heal. The surgery had just happened. I had a big splint or something like that on, wrapped up in bandages and all that. And so I go there, and while I'm there, she starts working on me every day. Tommy? I should say too,
Tommy?
Tommy, yeah, that's it. My siblings and everybody all call me Tommy. So, and really my extended family, I'm Little Tommy because my dad's name is Tom too. So anyway, or Little Tom when I got older. But anyway, this new guitar center had just opened like 2 months ago in St. Louis there, where kind of near where I used to live. And she kept saying, "Tommy, I think your first guitar is really good. I think you should take it up to Guitar Center and see what they think." And I'm like, first of all, it's not that good. Second of all, I don't even know if I'm going to, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to use my hand. There's no way I'm going to do that. She is this like really great, energetic Italian lady. And she's just like kept on my case every day. "You need to go do it, Tommy. Take your guitar up there." Finally, one day I'm like, "Okay, I'll take the guitar up there," but I'm pretty sure they're just going to be like, whatever. So I walk in there and I have, my hand is in this big splint, and I show them this guitar. I'm like, "Hey, would you guys be interested if I made some more guitars? Would you put it on consignment?" And so they take the guitar. They're like, "Let us go talk to the manager." They kind of disappear to the back, and what seemed like eternity later, they come out with the manager, and the manager's like, "Hey, this guitar is amazing." And I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'll tell you what, I'll take 3, price them any way you want. Just tell me how much and I'll write you a check."
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so I walked out of there like my head was just spinning. I'm like, what the heck just happened? Like, is this real? I mean, can I even do this? I was like unsure of like how to even proceed. And so then, at the time I was in, this is a really long story. At the time,
No, it's a great story. Please keep going. Please.
Okay. I was going to rehab, you go and you like put your hand in like hot sand, and then they have you work on squeezing a ball and things to try to get the mobility back and break up the scar tissue. And I forgot what else. And so I'd been going to this one guy who is the physical therapist for, I don't know, like 3 weeks or something at this point. And so this was the winter. I had gone back to live, by myself again. And I told Guitar Center, "Let's do it." Just crazy. I don't know how I was going to do it, but I was like, "Let's do it." And so I was kind of trying to figure out how to get some tools together and get things set up to like start building these 3 guitars. And so I was lonely because it was the winter. So I thought, I'm going to join a gym, because a gym had opened too near there. And which was kind of crazy because I was like this super like kind of skinny kid, and I couldn't grab a bar or anything either. So I went in there. It was like the first or second time I went there. I was still single at this time. What year are we at here? Like 1999 maybe. And I or no, it couldn't be 99. Anyway, I forgot. But anyway, yeah, maybe 99. And so I'm in the gym. It's like the first or second time I was there. I couldn't pick up a bar, so I was doing like a leg machine, and I see this girl at the counter who was like making smoothies and stuff like this. And I'm like, man, she's pretty cute. So I was too shy to like go talk to her, and like ask her out or something. So I went and I ordered a drink, and we start talking. And she said, oh yeah. She's like, well, every Friday night I go to this one church. So why don't you come over there? And she wrote directions. She said this Friday, and I'll see you there. And I was like, I mean, I had gone to some various churches and stuff growing up, but I was like, Friday night church, that seems kind of interesting. And so I was like, well, whatever. I was a young guy and she was really cute. So I was like, okay, I'll do this. So I go to the church on Friday night. I don't know anyone. I'm feeling super awkward. I'm standing in the back. She didn't show up at all. And I'm just standing there.
Wait a second. You were ghosted at a church?
Ghosted at a yes, for real. I did end up becoming friends with her later and stuff like that, and she was great. But anyway, this night at the church, though, that Friday night, this lady walks up to me, and to this day, I still don't know who she was. And she asked me my story. I tell her, about the hand, and I show her that I can't do a fist or whatever, and all this stuff. And she says, well, there's stories in the Bible of God healing people. And she's like, I can pray for you if you want. And I was like, okay. And so she just says this quick little prayer that my hand would be healed. I didn't really think a lot about it. And so then I left. And the next day or two, I don't know how long, and I kind of forgot about it, really. And the next day or two, I had my next rehab appointment, and I go to the rehab, and the guys, we start, put your hand in the sand. It was down to a pattern at this point. I knew exactly what to do. And so we start doing the first thing, and he's like, well, that's interesting. And then we get to the next thing, like, I don't know if it was squeezing the ball or what it was, but he's like, what have you been doing to your hand? And I'm like, nothing really different. I haven't really done anything different. And he goes, well, I think the scar tissue's gone. And so we run through some other tests, and my mobility was almost totally perfect at that point. And within, a week or so after, 2 weeks after that, it was completely perfect. And it's been totally perfect ever since. And so I went back and I finished those guitars, delivered them to Guitar Center. And by the time I was done with those, a lot of my old guitar teachers were placing orders. And I just kind of began making guitars, and that was kind of how everything unfolded.
That is a Greek myth of a backstory. You've got prophetic irony, you've got savior goddess woman, bit of cheeky divine intervention.
It was amazing, yeah. I wish I knew I've always wondered who she was, but
I thought she was going to be your wife, and I was like, the fact that you didn't know what year that was that you met her is a disgrace. And I was about to judge you for it, but no, it wasn't to be.
Oh, yeah.
But she did heal you, so
Well, I should add, so I should add that I did actually go back to that church, and I actually did meet my wife at that church, who was a different person.
Are you kidding?
Than them. Yes, I did.
This church
same place,
just sorted out your life. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Well, okay, wow. Yeah. That was a mega story, and it did need to be told in its entirety. So I'm glad that you did, and you cannot paraphrase something like that. I'm glad that you went into every detail. And I think I speak for everyone when I say we appreciate that you're here now and that it all did work out. And because that's kind of extraordinary.
The whole thing has been, I really feel like guitar making chose me more than I chose it. That's kind of different when I help students all the time. They're trying to plan it out and like make it happen, and it was totally different for me the way all this unfolded, and then fell right into the helping other people learn. It's kind of all sort of happened the same way.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you say it chose you. To me, that speaks to the importance of being open to opportunity, to unexpected experiences, because I think that's often what shapes a good life. I know it's not always about chasing what you think you want, but about noticing what arrives and being willing to step into that. I feel like I definitely feel like I haven't had the same scale of experiences as you, but I've definitely had moments in my life where things happened that were completely outside of my control. And what I've learned is that the real challenge is not just surviving those moments, but rather noticing the opportunities that are hidden inside of them, even if they don't look like opportunities. Yeah, like when you showed up at that church, I'm not particularly religious myself, but even if it wasn't like divine intervention in a literal sense, just the action of believing and of opening yourself to that possibility may have been what helped you heal. Call it prayer, call it mindset, call it faith. The power is definitely in the openness. And definitely. In a career like this, I think you have to really become an expert at exactly that, at recognizing opportunities even when they arrive disguised as setbacks, and having enough faith to follow them is so important. So anyway, yeah. I did prepare a list of questions before this chat, but to be honest, a lot of them have gone out the window, because when you talk, this is why I wanted to get you on the channel, you open up so many unexpected diversions that are interesting to me as a listener. So, but there is one question that I do want to scurry back to, which is about identity. And you mentioned being shaped by that film, Mr. Holland's Opus. I haven't actually seen it, but I know it's about a teacher whose identity is wrapped up in his craft. Obviously, you're navigating teacher master roles all the time with the Luthier's Edge and then your job. But you've spoken before about how negativity shaped you early on and how much weight you gave to other people telling you what you could or couldn't do. But later on, you did manage to kind of reparent that part of yourself and shift from the mindset of I can't to I can. And I guess I'm curious as to whether that still shows up for you today. Are there moments in your craft, or even with the Luthier's Edge or on social media or just running the business side of things, where you catch yourself in that old mindset and you have to reconvince yourself again that you are in fact capable? Is that willingness to challenge your own narrative still part of your day-to-day, or has that changed over time?
Well, I think there was a big turning point that happened. So I'll tell a little bit of a story, but before I do, I think, well, and let me just tell the story, actually. That I think that'll be the way to do it. But basically, okay, so it's kind of a continuation of the story we just told. So yeah, I started making guitars full time, and then I started really building things up. Of course, I eventually got married and we had kids. And so by about 2008, I just felt like my wife runs the business side of stuff, and I do the creative side of stuff. And she's really good at that stuff, and I'm really bad at the business side of it all. And
okay. So your wife actually works for you, or works?
I think I work for her, actually.
You're a team.
But yes, we're definitely a team.
Yeah.
Yes, we're totally a team. But yeah, we're polar opposites, so it's just perfect. Like, I'm not saying it's easy to run a business together, but we're over 26 years now I've been building for over 26 years. I think we're coming up on 24 years of being married, but we made it through a lot of stuff. But around 2008, we were just kind of like hitting this stride, and it felt like I was doing like 12 guitars a year at that time, which I'm not a real mass production type of luthier. Like, I need space to like really be creative. And even back at the beginning, now so even more, I just really lean into that because I know it's my strength. But then I was really just trying to grow, and we were doing really good. I had a good order list built up. And then in 2008, there was that big, what do they call it? Like the housing bubble popped, or what are this? Like a market crash in America.
Yeah, multiple things going on in 2008, recession included. Yeah.
So like 2008, 2009, that time frame, all that stuff happened. And it was like it felt like a week, but it probably was longer, but it just felt so fast. I started getting phone calls like, I got to cancel my order. I got to, like all these things started happening, and things just started looking really like scary. Like I just felt like I was looking into a black hole. Like, how the heck are we going to keep the house? I mean, it got really bad at one point. And so I really hit this like rock bottom at one point where I felt like I was a total failure at guitar making. And it's so interesting. I'm going to go on this. I'm going to let this story kind of unfold. But one thing I was afraid to do was to do any work on the side, because then I wouldn't be a real luthier. and I was super embarrassed about something like that happening. And that's because you mentioned identity. Like, not only was my identity in my guitars, but my self-worth as a human being. I think I sort of band-aided up the trauma from, other things in my life. And of course, my experience in music theory when I first tried to do that in college, and really got, publicly shamed about all that. And then I struggled kind of through music school too, like when I finally went back to it, because I still felt like that. And I was still identified a little bit like the dumb guy in the class or something, And so I kind of band-aided and sort of patched that over with, now I'm a luthier and I'm good at that, and I can, and whatever. So when that business started like struggling, it was like I as a person was crumbling and failing, And so I sort of, so what I ended up doing was in 2009 or something, my brother-in-law told me about this thing called WordPress and like website design and stuff. And I thought, I'd been kind of interested in that anyway. And I can't remember, I might have built my first tbguitars.com as my guitar website. I might have built the first version of that back then. I can't remember. But anyway, I was always interested in, I remember getting a book from the library to learn CSS and HTML and stuff like that. And just because I was interested in it. And so I ended up getting this little side job, like building these little, helping people build WordPress websites in the evenings and the weekends so that I could keep building guitars. But I was really embarrassed about it. It was a big secret. I didn't want anyone to know. And I just remember I just hit this point where I just felt like I am a complete failure. I'm totally worthless. And I think I remember one time crying to my wife or something. And I was like, making guitars is the only thing I have to offer the world. Without that, I'm nothing. And it was a painful process, but during that, it like broke off of me, and it kind of like all that shell just like cracked and fell off. And I came, what emerged out of that was, and it took time for that to happen, but what emerged out of that was like a much better way to live, and much better guitars, a much better way to build guitars when your very existence as a worthwhile human being wasn't hanging on whether or not you messed up on this guitar or not, or how it turned out. That's just, you can't be creative with like a, with that kind of pressure, like crushing you, you know what I mean? All the time. You're limited at best, you know what I mean? To like what you can achieve. But when you can let that go and realize that that's not who you are, it's just one of the things that you do. It's just like this, the weight fell off. And I have an article over on theartofluthiery.com. I think it's called I'm Not a Guitar Maker, or no, I think it's called I'm Not a Luthier, I Just Make Guitars, or something like that. And that was a point that when I wrote that article was like me trying to like put that out to the world as a statement and like share some of that, because that was so healing and transformative to me when I realized that. And the odd thing about it, which you kind of alluded to, sometimes when things happen, it doesn't feel like it's a good thing. But when, that became my hobby, sort of, was learning to build websites and do a little bit of coding and graphic design and all that stuff. And I discovered that I really kind of felt like that was a good balancing pastime for me. So like guitar making, if you make a mistake, you're done. On the web, if you make a mistake, it's okay. You can just restore the backup, right? And so it was kind of like this fun little balance that I started to enjoy. Little did I know, years later, I was going to need those skills to build the Art of Luthiery, and then later to build the Luthier's Edge. So I built all that stuff myself and still run all that stuff. And I actually enjoy that part of it as well, along with, the guitar making is obviously still my main passion and a thing I just feel like I was meant for. But, and we can get into like the deeper levels, I'm always looking at the deeper levels. So why am I making guitars, and what's the point, what's the purpose of them, and all that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know, maybe I went too far off, but
No. Just to circle back, I really identify with what you're saying here. And what struck me most was your point about grieving that sense of purpose, because often it's not the work itself that we grieve, it's the identity that's tied to it. And separating that identity and purpose is really hard. And I think a lot of creative people fall into that trap where we pour our entire sense of self into what we do, whether it's like the tortured artist trope, or the musician or the craftsperson, it becomes quite consuming. And when you rely on that identity as the thing that gives you worth, you do hand your power over to other people. And then when change comes along, which is both natural and healthy and human, you suddenly think, well, if I'm not that person anymore, what have I got to offer? And, you know, something that you said that you felt during the recession was that you felt embarrassed when the phone stopped ringing, and that, of course, clients had to make difficult financial decisions and you did have to take on other work. Well, I think the industry now is in a very similar position, and it's incredibly difficult to survive in this career alone. It's not enough to simply learn a craft. With AI and mass production so advanced, like, the pressure is just enormous. And I actually made a video about it last week. It just feels like a really hard time, not just for craftspeople, but for our identity as makers and as a human species, right? But anyway, I could talk about this for days, but just to bring it back to you, the comfort seems to be that we all go through this. Most people question their identity at some point. I certainly did when I started my YouTube channel, for example, and in a strange way, trolling actually really helped with that, because the name calling and the theory making and all these things that they assume about me and my background are so inconsistent and so wild that it just loses its power, and it's enabled me to foster an identity that's consistent with my reality. All this to say, I guess it's something that I wanted to ask you about. Like, how did Luthier's Edge is obviously a big part of your job. How did that side of your life begin, and what does it mean to you to help people to learn to make guitars? That was the longest way of saying all of that, but I guess that's what I'm asking you.
Well, I think it naturally leads, and we don't have to do this, but it seems like it kind of naturally leads to where these things, where things shifted when people started reaching out to me to see if I could help them learn guitar making. And that whole thing sort of happened, but because that identity was sort of like already stripped bare, it was easy for me to be like, okay, you know, and not be threatened by that.
When we caught up a few weeks ago about the Luthier's Edge, what struck me was that this isn't just about techniques or tools, it's really about community. And you even shared some really moving stories about people who've been in very dark places and how being part of the Luthier's Edge gave them a sense of belonging. And I'd really like to hear you talk more about that, if it's okay. Yeah,
definitely. Like, so I guess because of, you know, kind of what I went through, and, you know, after that darker period where I kind of, you know, went through all that stuff, I did start getting orders again, and things, you know, it was okay. Everything was fine. I didn't need to do extra work on the side.
But it always is okay, isn't it? Yeah.
I was so free after that. It's like a completely new chapter of my career after that, because I didn't have to prove to anybody anymore through my guitars anything, and I could just create, and I can reach such higher levels and enjoy the process so much more, you know. And so to kind of tie this into the teaching part, somewhere around 2010 or something, people just started emailing me and saying, hey, could I be your apprentice? And like asking me all these questions and everything. I'm not exactly sure what prompted that or how that all happened. Maybe they just saw my website and saw my guitars or something. I'm not sure. And I wanted to help a lot of people, but I was pretty overloaded. Like, I was working like crazy 60-hour weeks, and, you know, and I had a family with young kids and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really difficult. So I thought, you know, because I had the background in the website stuff, I was like, maybe I'll just launch a website and I'll put some blog posts. When they ask me questions, I'll put some blog posts on there, and I can help more people that way. And so that's in 2011, I launched theartofluthiery.com for that purpose. And it had the exact opposite effect, because the more articles I wrote, the more questions I got, and the more, you know what I mean, the more people started reaching out to me and stuff, which actually turned out to be beautiful. It's not like I hated that. I mean, I loved it and I wanted to help people, but I just couldn't at the time. And I was just trying to figure out, how does this all fit together, you know? And let's see, I guess I should mention this too, because we're talking about identity still, is this idea came up where I was thinking of doing a class or something. And some of my clients were like, whoa, be careful. you're going to get branded as a teacher and not not a high-end luthier, and there were like a lot of people.
Your client said that?
Yes. And some
interesting
players and stuff. It was kind of like, being nice to, like giving me their advice, like, and it made sense to me. It kind of scared me a little bit, but it just, I think, okay, well, I'll tell you the kind of the transformational moment. So when I knew that was a path I needed to take. So I dabbled a little bit. I did a couple of French polishing, like live courses where somebody came to my workshop. And I think it was one of those guys and it was amazing. It was just such a wonderful experience, like getting to talk to them and just seeing them like light up and like get it. And like, it just, I don't know, it like nourished me somehow. It was so good. It's like the same thing with guitars, like when you deliver a guitar to somebody and it's not just a fancy thing, it's like music. A musical note can carry a message. It can carry an emotion, and it's really powerful because it bypasses the brain basically, and it just goes right to the heart. And a guitar can do that too. And that's really, and I guess among all these things, I'll probably keep coming back to this, is that maybe this was a period where I was waking up to the fact that the guitar isn't the main thing. The courses aren't the main thing. None of that matters. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter nearly as much as how it affects people and like what impact it has on their lives. And so like what I started realizing is that when I was building a guitar for someone, sometimes they were all custom orders. And so people would share their stories and what they were struggling with and things. And I really cared about them. And I called it, the name I gave it, and this is way back then, and I still think of it this way, I called it the attitude of the heart. And I realized, and I tested this on guitar after guitar, the attitude of my heart when it was in a place where I really loved that person. And I was just sort of like feeling this gratitude and this care for them, even maybe praying for them. Sometimes I even write things inside the guitar specifically for them, and I've never told them about it. The guitar would, this is the first time I'm like actually talking about that, like in someplace online or something, but many of them have very special things like that I made for them inside the guitars. And amazing things started happening with the guitars where, one person was really struggling, and I would make him this guitar and I would be thinking about this bringing him peace and helping him with his relationship with his kids or, whatever the thing is. And then he would get the guitar and I would almost always get an email or a call or something. And they would say, it's the funniest thing. Every time I play this guitar, this sense of like peace just washes over me. And I mean, and it's just the amount of inspiration for that and the depth of that brings to my work still today. It's amazing. And that's why I do that. And I always was a little skeptical that maybe this was just in my head until until more time went on. And some of those guitars ended up changing hands. And one specific example is I made a guitar this one was about like healing and just peace and relief from the stresses of, that you're struggling with in your life. And so the client told me that when he got the guitar. Years passed by and he sold that guitar and someone else bought it, some stranger that I've never talked to or never met. And I get an email randomly from this person who says, "Hey, I just wanted to tell you, I bought this particular guitar that you made. And he said, and here's what's going on in my life. I have my best friend and my wife have Alzheimer's and I work full time to care for them. And it's really, really difficult. It takes everything I've got. And at the end of every day, the only thing that brings me peace, is..."
Oh, Tom, you're going to have everyone weeping at home.
Is when I play your guitar. And that was a really important one to me because it kind of, it's anecdotal, I guess, but it's enough proof for me that the guitar really it is more than just a thing, It contains that feeling and that heart and everything that we put into it.
It's not the first time we've had tears on the channel, by the way. It's just refreshing they're not coming from me this time.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And so and I didn't understand this, obviously back on the level that I do now. back then, but I was beginning to awaken to all this and like really go deeper into that, into my building. And it's so wonderful and so amazing to be able to do that. And it just, when the attitude of your heart is right, it's, for me, that's when I have those moments. And I don't know if you've ever had this, but you'll do something on the guitar. You'll complete some miter joints or binding or some inlay or whatever the thing that was so difficult and seeming impossible. And you get done and you look at it and you're like, wow, I did that? How the heck did I do that? In some place inside me, I'm like, I don't think I'm good enough to do that. And somehow there it is. It's like this, you can sort of like go beyond your actual physical or mental skill limitations because you're operating in a different zone, like in that flow there or something. I don't know, but it's a beautiful kind of place, the place I always work to try to get to. And so then, back to when I started doing a lot of people were reaching out, asking me, can I be your apprentice and can you teach me this stuff? And somebody said, hey, maybe you should make a class on French polishing. And I was like, I think maybe I should. And so I made this, I'll try it. I had a guitar coming up that was going to be French polished. I was like, I'm just going to film this. I don't know anything about making classes, but I'm just going to film it and I'm going to share everything just like somebody was in my workshop. And so I filmed that French polishing class and I launched that. And that was kind of like the beginning of the Luthier's Edge. And though the whole idea and the community part of it wasn't there yet. And people started taking that class. And what amazed me was that the same kind of transformations in the lives of the students started happening, like beyond my wildest dreams. And then I made more classes, obviously, as this all grew. And, I'll tell you I got two stories, maybe, if there's time to tell them all and I'm not talking too much.
There's always time.
One person reached out to me and said, I took some of your classes and I was wondering if I could meet you for a coffee. This was early on. I don't remember how many students I had, but it wasn't that many back then. And so there was more time for things like this. And so I met him for a coffee. And this is ironic because the place we met for coffee was the same building that was the gym where I met the girl who told me to go to that church.
Oh, for God's sake. This is like the sacred postcode.
They changed it into a coffee shop. And so he said, why don't we meet at this place? And so I got there and I was like, hey, this is the same building that was the gym. And so we go in and he tells me the story about how all these tragic things, terribly tragic things happened to him. And he was just really struggling, him and his family. And he said, I had to meet you because I wanted to tell you that I reached a point recently where I decided that I didn't want to live anymore. And he said, I decided I was actually going to do it. And so he said, I was there and I was about to, and I can't remember exactly what he said. I wish I could, but it was like so emotional. Something along the lines as I was about to pull the trigger. And he said, all of a sudden I remembered what it felt like when I was taking your courses. And he said, I remember what it was like when Tom Bills was explaining French polishing to me of all things. And he said, I decided to give life another chance. And we both sat there in that coffee shop and just cried. And it was really amazing experience. And I'm so grateful that he shared that with me because, that's a hard thing kind of to share. And when I walked out of there that day, I knew that there was a lot more to this than guitar classes or guitars or whatever, It's like people's lives who need whatever the little bit of love or care, healing that came through somehow through such a funny thing like French polishing class or something like that, And, and there's been countless stories. I actually it's our 10-year anniversary this year. And so I went through and I got together like a couple hundred testimonials and reviews and some of the letters people wrote me. and I just put it on the Art of Lutherie, and it was just such an incredible experience for me to go through and read all those. And it's incredible. And like another one. This one's a little quicker, but was a guy who was estranged from his daughter. He had to get divorced because he was hooked on like over-the-counter drugs and having all kinds of problems and stuff like that. And he came. I think he actually wrote me because he wanted to join the Luthier's Edge, and I don't think he could. And he told me some of his story, and I was like, this guy needs to be in here. And so I'm like, just come in. You just need to get in here. And so he became part of it. And I like gave him access to it. And he came in, and I just kind of loved on him a little bit, and just he took the classes, and we emailed a few times and things like that. And then a few months later, he wrote me to tell me that he was off the drugs. And then a few months later, he wrote me to tell me that he started a little guitar repair business. And then he wrote me a little bit later that he got back together with his daughter. And then he wrote me a letter a little after that and said, my whole life is beautiful, and I'm getting married. And he invited me to his wedding and told me, thank you so much. And this wouldn't have happened if you didn't bring me into the Luthier's Edge. It's just, and I still don't understand how, this translates and how this all works, but I love being part of it. So.
One of the things that really struck me, aside from how moving those stories are, is something that I've noticed about this craft and about generally working with your hands. For some reason, guitar making, though, especially, seems to be relevant, but for a long time, men talking about their feelings has been completely ridiculed by society, and this portrait of men as these still, unshakable vessels is very much a trope we live with, which has obviously been ingrained for generations. But of course, we're finally starting to see how damaging that's been, and that's why spaces like the Luthier's Edge feel really vital. And spaces like that are helping to unpick centuries of that conditioning, as I say, particularly for men. Women have always had or been allowed to be emotional and to share and to have space for that, but men are, of course, facing a huge crisis around mental health. And what I've noticed in this craft is that some men are starting to give it a go, opening up and to show up in communities and be vulnerable. And it's really beautiful to hear stories of that happening in real time. The old tropes of like the craftsman as the lonely older man who never speaks, he just sort of grunts and makes stuff in his darkened garage, right? But what you've built with the Luthier's Edge is a really safe environment by the sounds, where people can explore not only their skills, but kind of what it feels like to be in a place to explore themselves. And by lowering one wall, we can lower the other, and working with your hands can really open up the depths of who you are, or open up to the depths of who you are. We're getting a bit emotional and deep here, but and yeah, I think I wanted to bring you on the channel because I do think so much of my audience would benefit from a space like the Luthier's Edge with you as a role model, because as I say, as a minority, as a woman in this industry, I can talk about my feelings. I'm not belittled for that, and that's a luxury, and it's one of the things that I do get easier. Not everything is, obviously, but it's a big one, and being able to be emotional and express myself is something that I really feel lucky to have been able to do. I can be supported without judgment or fear of being perceived as weak. And yeah, I think it's great that we're opening more spaces where men can do that too, to make this industry a better place.
I think you're right about, I think, and that's something, that article I mentioned before where I mentioned about, I'm not a luthier, I just make guitars. That's one of the things I talk about. I kind of try to I think, if I remember right, it was a long time ago when I wrote that, but I think I was trying to open it up to like other crafts as well. Just there's something about like doing real creating, not just like following someone else's steps. You know, I think that's one of the big parts about the way the courses are kind of different in the Luthier's Edge, is like I'm trying to help really get down to the core of like why are we taking this step? like so here's step 1, 2, 3, and then the other, like there's this horizontal plane and then there's depth to it. And that's where I like to like sort of live and hang out, is in that deep part of like, why are we doing this? Is this the right thing? What are the core fundamental things, this like depth of it? And when you sort of explore things on those deeper levels, I think what we're doing is we're exploring ourselves. We're like going, that's one of the ways that we begin to like delve deeper, beyond just glue this piece of wood to this piece of wood or whatever. And then improving the guitars is a process of sort of fixing and improving yourself, and it's just like this like healing thing. And I don't talk about that in a class, but I think it's under the surface maybe because that's the way that I deal with it myself, and that's what kind of helped me. And and I had one of the people that helped me was a luthier named Eugene Clark. I went to learn French polishing from him in 2004. He was in Washington. He's passed away since, unfortunately, but he was an amazing, amazing luthier. Just a really interesting guy, like from a totally different generation. And he used to just tell me stories. I went there just for French polishing, but we became friends. And he did for me what I try to do for the guys in the Luthier's Edge and girls in the Luthier's Edge. And, and sometimes it's like, a lot of times actually, it's just helping people deal with the fear and the panic, when something goes wrong. And he did that for me. Like, I would call him and say, oh my gosh, one time I dropped a guitar and cracked it the day before I was supposed to ship it. And then I ended up going like $50,000 in credit card debt as a result of that. And like this whole crazy story, it all turned out okay in the end, but it was like years of struggle from that one mistake. And it seemed like life was over. There's so many learning experiences you go through. But anyway, Eugene was the guy that I called and said, oh my gosh, this just happened. And he said, it's going to be all right. Just calm down, take a breath. We're going to figure out a way to fix it. And so I try to do that as much as I can for the members in the Luthier's Edge. And I think that just helps so much to like have somebody to sort of help you train yourself on how to calm down and get down to this point where you can think clearly and see clearly, and to the deeper levels, where there's that calm baseline under there where you're improving, you're exploring yourself and discovering things about yourself and discovering things about your guitars. And I don't know, somehow it all works together. And to kind of circle back a little, I think you can do that in any craft if you really take the right approach and you go for that depth and that real heart space that you're creating from,
Absolutely. I think that's so interesting. Like, I feel like I'm going through this in a very intense way at the moment. And of course, you're always learning every single day. And for me, I've only been doing this a fraction of the time that you have, but I do know how to build a guitar. So it still delights me when when it completely changes my reality around that. Even yesterday, I strung up a new guitar and I just learned so much in that single day, as I always do. And once I began to really understand the implications of each component of a guitar, I realized that I actually realized I was living a better life as a result. There's no doubt about it. I found a real mentor in the modern ice bath. That provides me with an opportunity to observe my own behavior, much like a mentor would to a student.
Yeah.
And you can actually eventually, with practice, step out as an outsider and say, okay, we're going into crisis mode here, but we're not going to freak out. We're just going to deal with it. And we're going to breathe. And this kind of mindset mirrors craft. You learn when you do certain steps earlier in the build, the effect that it will have later. And it's the same lesson that now takes me to the gym or to Pilates or whatever it is to improve my health. I know that it's going to impact on how I perform tomorrow, but I didn't understand that before guitar making. Through the craft, I started to see the cause and effect of every day. Mm-hmm. And personally, it's made me a lot healthier and able to make healthier decisions. Anyway, I think that's why I'll put extra glue on a joint, or like I'll make sure that it fits really well because I know that it's going to impact so much down the line. And this kind of holistic approach to craft is something that I'm really enjoying in life at the moment. And it just kind of reminded me of what you were saying, because I think you feel that too, which is maybe why I enjoy hearing you speak so much. Anyway, I feel very grateful, and I'm sure you do as well, that we get to spend our days doing guitar making.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And I think it's really beautiful when you open up to, like you were saying, like how interconnected everything is, you know, like working out. I like to go work out. I love that part because it just, like you said, it makes me do so much better work. It helps me. And I learn things from the process of working out or from the process of whatever I'm doing that makes me a better guitar maker. And through my experience, you know, like, you made me realize when you were saying that like a lot of the things that I was sort of afraid of ended up being things that actually made me a better guitar maker. You know, like, well, I mean, just teaching, putting every secret and everything that I have learned or that was passed down to me into courses to give away was really scary at first. I thought, well, if I give this away, then what do I have? You know, but that's another layer that had to break off.
Ironically, the fact that you're secure and generous enough to share your knowledge will make you completely untouchable as a brand.
Yeah, and you never stop learning either. So like you were saying, you learned something from the guitar that you just strung up. I'm, 26 years in, and I feel like a little kid. In fact, I feel like I know less because, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah, of course, it gets scary the further you go. Like the more that you realize that you don't know, the more stressful it gets, right?
Yeah. And helping other people is so awesome too, because when there's this power that somebody who's new to something has, it's like a superpower because they didn't drop a guitar and make their family go into debt. They didn't do all the dumb things that I've done yet. Well, hopefully they won't. I'm there to try to help them from doing it, but all the scars aren't there, and it's good for you after you've been doing it for a long time to be around those people. And it's just you can give to them and they give back to you. And it's a beautiful, like symbiotic relationship where you both grow way faster and deeper and more healthy, and you both reach higher than you could have apart. So that's why I think it's so important. And that is one really cool thing, like you said, about the guitar making, like, I guess, industry or community or whatever you call it in general.
So one thing I should address is that I personally am not a member of the Luthier's Edge yet. For a long time, I was honestly a bit scared and a bit scarred by this industry. I had a very negative experience early on with a lot of bullying and trying to squash me out. And I guess much like you did with that public shaming during your jazz degree feels wrong to say.
Yes, it is, yeah, jazz guitar.
But yeah, anyway, it left me feeling really disconnected. Obviously, I know it comes from a place of insecurity for them, so I understand it. But I've decided that I think, obviously I'm aware that was the minority, but it did put me off from joining any kind of Lutherie community. It just freaked me out. And I just didn't have the space for it mentally. But I think talking to you has been so healing. And since I put the pieces together to create a solid life and a solid foundation around my own ability and my own personal security and wellness, I think I'm ready to be more of a part of the community. And I'm really excited to see what it's going to do for me, because I think
cool. That's
the
awesome.
Majority of people, certainly the ones worth knowing, are just so kind and so helpful and sweet. And we do need to just stick together, because it's hard to make a living and the world is changing, and we don't want people to stop being guitar makers. We don't want the craft to die. We don't want that. So the best way to do that is to band together.
That's so cool.
And there are a lot of people on the Luthier's Edge who do sell guitars for a living, like you and I. And we're always going to be stronger and make better guitars if we're all talking to each other. And I'm looking forward to embracing not just the identity of the luthier, but the identity of the student again. And what a luxury to be able to do that. So I'm going to go join it after this call. And if anyone else who's listening feels as inspired as I was by Tom, then I'm going to drop some links and you can go and join as well. Tom, it's been such a pleasure. And one thing I just want to circle back to finish is something that I mentioned in a video last week. It was a video about how to make a living as a guitar maker from my perspective, just because it's something I get asked a lot. And there was one point in there about the importance of keeping a sense of wonder. As I said in that video, I don't know much, but if there's one thing I do know, it's how moving it is when somebody who has been doing this for so long could still hold on to that wonder and project it quite so well to the external world.
Oh, yeah. And I saw that video. That was great. That was a great video, and that part specifically too. Yeah, it's so important. And we have to keep that sense of wonder or we stop growing. Once we stop learning, then our road ends, And so we have to work sometimes to keep ourselves soft and open and have our heart on our sleeve enough to keep. Yeah.
It's incredibly inspiring. So thank you for sharing.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.